Hi, my name is Carol Beauchemin. I'm a British professional driver and motorcycle instructor. Motorcycle rider training being a vocation I've pursued for 40 years, while also pursuing other employment, including driving commercial vehicles, which also included spending 7 years as an accredited health and safety rep, representing a fleet of drivers on management committees. I'm also a systemic safety protagonist. Let's start off with the negatives. Zero vision. The absence of accidents does not represent a safe environment. In fact, the absence of accidents can lead to overconfidence, the assumption that what we are currently doing is safe, and therefore we can get complacent. It's reactive rather than proactive, while also stating the obvious. It should be taken for granted that nobody wants anyone to die on the roads. It has even been found that those who pursue a zero vision target were marginally more likely to have accidents. Road safety has become dominated by behaviour-based safety. We are taught to be defensive, and that accidents only happen to those who break the rules. Ignoring the reality that teaching people to be defensive traumatizes them, the 3E's thinking, developed over 80 years ago, was a product of the motor industry's quest to avoid blame from the fact that motor vehicles were killing greater numbers of people. Engineering has become fixated with selling technology fixes on the strength of faulting humans without actually understanding them, while education has become dominated by enforcement. In turn, enforcement has seen ever-increasing hyper-compliance to address the failures in the previous levels of compliance. So what is hyper-compliance? This is finding that despite having rules and procedures, accidents will still happen. So instead of addressing the reasons that contributed to the accident, more rules are added. The most prominent manifestation of this in road safety is the addiction to chasing a speed fix. What is a safe speed? One could argue that 0 is an unsafe speed. If you want to contest that point, try standing still in the middle of an expressway in peak flow. Speed is the intrinsic quality of movement. The purpose of any vehicle is to speed. When we look beyond the schoolbook physics default that the faster a vehicle is going, the more damage it will do, instead looking at what is recorded on the world's roads, then other patterns emerge. It was found in detailed study of the British police recorded incident data that 95% of pedestrians killed on British roads were from collisions with vehicles travelling at less than the posted speed limit. Speed is a contra-indicator to pedestrian safety. From this I started comparing data from other countries. I have not found one yet where the peak time for pedestrian fatalities did not align with peak flow times, typically in the evening when people are commuting home, children are out of school, and after-work social gatherings are underway. We are told people should not be distracted. Is that actually how we work? Personally, as a professional motorcycle instructor, my job was not to be distracted. But having 2 novice road users also in my care, often for the first time they had ever operated a motorised vehicle on public roads, meant I had to think for them and other road users as well as myself. As a delivery driver, my mind also had to be on finding an address, routing, navigating targets and deadlines. I've driven many things for many different businesses, never has the focus just been driving. This is what we do for 99.999% of the time. People operate within an imperfect system, making little adjustments to avoid confrontations with those around us. Note how close to 0 that is. So easy to assume that we only need to fix the 0.001% to reach the 0 target. But that is not what reality has shown. While safety on the roads has improved over decades, now across the world we see plateauing statistics. In fact, since the UN and WHO adopted the zero vision narrative a decade ago, targets to reduce fatalities by 50% finished with rising or plateauing road fatalities in the majority of target countries across the planet. Yet the majority of accidents continue to happen to normal everyday people doing normal everyday things, often as they have for decades without incident, but then one day they are surprised by an unexpected event. I would like to share with you a different approach being applied to safety thinking in other safety critical environments, collectively known as systemic thinking. To start, I will use an example from Russell Ackoff from his 1993 lecture on From Mechanistic to Systemic Thinking. Suppose you wanted to build the best car ever. You assemble a team of automotive engineers from the best in the world and ask them to determine what is the best available engine. Say they were to suggest Rolls-Royce. Using this method, your team would pick all the best parts for your concept car. If you were to buy these parts and ask your team to assemble them, what would happen? None of the parts would be compatible with each other, so in effect you would only have a pile of parts, not a complete vehicle. When I asked my partner to proofread this, she pointed out that is not entirely correct. She mentioned Project Binky, a project to fit a Toyota Celica engine and running parts into an old Austin Mini. Systemic thinking is about understanding how the whole system works together rather than the collection of parts taken individually. Project Binky is a wonderful example of systemic thinking as they overcome the challenges of making everything fit and work within the confines of a very restricted system. These days, systemic safety approaches, such as safety differently and safety too, are being widely applied to a variety of safety-critical environments. While there have been some suggesting its application to road safety, such as no surprise, no accident, mainstream road safety remains dominated by hindsight bias blame and compliance-focused approaches. When learning to drive or ride, people are typically taught to follow a set of rote-learned rules. Driving skills are often focused on basic machine handling, often on simulated road layouts that have little resemblance to reality. Then supported learning is turned off at the point of a test, when the real learning on how to share the roads is only just beginning. This is unfortunate, as a systemic approach focuses far more on understanding why drivers and riders avoid accidents for the 99.999% of the time, rather than limited focus on attributing blame in hindsight of an accident to someone after a split-second decision in that 0.001% moment of time, then using the evidence from it to model road safety management on. This is comparable to trying to learn to swim by only watching people drowning. But road safety has been built on 80 years of blame avoidance. Human biases are an interesting point of study, products of survival instincts that have contributed to us being the dominant species on the planet. Confirmation bias leads us to favoring things that confirm our existing beliefs. Correspondence bias leads people to attribute behaviors to individuals that can be entirely explained by the environments in which they occur. Both of these examples affect how we share the roads. Groupthink is another bias of note. We can call this herd mentality. A human on their own would struggle in the wilderness, but we are social animals who work together. One comparison with the natural world is wildebeest migration across a crocodile-infested river. The grass is greener on the other side, with food resources diminished behind. The first to cross the river may be the first to food, but they are also more likely to be food for the waiting predators. Safety is achieved via mass migration. Crossing the river in bulk ensures survival of the majority. Humans, like other animals, survive better when we work together, yet road safety is built on the language of confrontation that divides us. There is another bias, defensive attribution error. This can lead people to attribute blame to another person in an accident, as it lessens the perception that their actions contributed to the accident. Being defensive is to protect oneself from attack. Is this the right language to use when we share the roads? Would empathic not be a better approach? It's what we already do for the majority of the time. We all need to know which side of the road to drive on. However, to assume everyone will stick to their side of the road will only lead to a confrontation when we find somebody who is not. Some would argue that this is a result of people not following the rules. However, it's perfectly legal to overtake or cross the road to turn into an offside junction. Also, as there is no international standard to which side of the road to drive on, people can make mistakes and end up driving on the wrong side. Of course, people should not make mistakes. But nobody is perfect. Who here can say they have never made a mistake? Have you seen a selective attention test counting basketball passes on YouTube? Such a simple test, worth a look if you've not done it. What it shows is how easy the eye can be fooled and how easy it is to miss a detail. So how does this translate to road safety? Often we hear talk of near misses. What is the difference between a near miss and just background noise that is part of the daily interactions that we encounter on the roads? I'm going to share a video at this point, a collection of near misses. Follow the address on the slide if you would like to see it. The question regarding near misses is a trick one. If I asked all of you individually to define what a near miss was, then I would get multiple different answers. I spent over 30 years teaching people to follow rules. This has led me to realizing that simply following the rules is not enough to avoid accidents. Safety and compliance being very different things. We are advanced prediction machines. We use our experiences to predict what will happen next. This works really well for the majority of the time. When we start driving or get a new vehicle, at first it takes time to familiarize ourselves with the controls. After a while, this becomes part of our unconscious motor memory. We don't have to consciously think about how to change gear beyond sensing if we need to change up or down in response to the environment. For those tasks that need focus, we cycle through them to maintain spatial awareness. I often challenge those who suggest not to drive distracted, as to drive or ride we need to be constantly switching between points of attention, being distracted from the majority of these driving tasks for the majority of the time. This is why target fixation can be a problem when we only focus on one thing, missing an important piece of the puzzle from somewhere else. There has been research done on the effects of surprising startle events on airline pilots. It has been found that performance drops when a sudden startling event happens. It can trigger the flight or fight response, kicking in a different part of the brain that moves beyond the slower logical response. We don't need to work out what type of predator is stalking us when the response is to run. Maybe the wrong response. We may have been better off climbing a tree. Some will. But only in hindsight will it typically be determined as to which response was best to that particular event. We can compare this response to a lizard darting under a rock when it senses a predator, but putting a lizard in charge of a vehicle at the very moment the pilot services are critical is probably not the best plan. Yet the current system wants a linear root cause of failure to be blamed in hindsight so that vengeance can be served. Another of Russell Ackoff's quotes is, "Managers who do not know how to measure what they want settle for wanting what they can measure." Who here has heard anyone discussing measuring the amount of startling effect that contributed to the accident? Well, many accidents are blamed on speed, not because speed caused the accident, but because speed does offer a nice easy fix in hindsight for those charged with attributing blame. This is not to say we should exceed the limit everywhere, just to focus on speed is itself a distraction from helping people avoid accidents. What we should be doing is helping people to better predict and avoid surprises. Another big part of human abilities is to teach and learn from each other. Sharing experiences can help improve our prediction skills. The biggest challenge here is overcoming human egos and the default ridicule that results from making mistakes. This is where a psychologically safe space to discuss experiences without being chastised, ridiculed or blamed is the best way to improve safety. Unfortunately, this is often hard to achieve in a workspace built on confrontational defensive defaults. But it is worth attempting as the effects have been proven to reduce chances of accidents happening, and the byproducts are a more productive, happier workforce and less stressful driving on the roads. You will hear in the next presentation from Ali how the road safety empire proposes to keep doing the same things it has done for the previous decades, suggesting that more evidence is required despite its 80 years of attributing blame in hindsight. He will present the Emperor's new clothes to suggest the unsafe system's zero-vision dogma is the only game in town, and that we need ever-increasing top-down hyper-compliance. Just remember that systemic safety approaches work with us from the ground up to help us all do what we are already doing for the majority of the time, safer. There is another way. Systemic safety. This is the way.